Su negra le pegó. Se le fue la negra. Escuchen la verdad. No le pega ni negra. Okay, my friends. When the world and the universe give you lemons, you turn to bachata and La Rebelión de Joe Arroyo from, when was the song? 1976 or something originally done at that time. So everybody for and weathering the storm, I think now more than ever is a better time for us to turn to Taju's equity framework, because even though I approach this with a smile, the fact that our schools aren't necessarily always wired for our students of color, our language learners, our dual language kiddos, it really hits home when we have to be here for professional learning, and this is what we encounter, right? So I thank everybody for continuing the professional learning today. We have double and triple checked our security settings and checkpoints. Hopefully we don't have any other issues. This is our equity framework. I want to be very upfront that this is what frames every single thing that we possibly do. It is at the core of the recommendations for those things that we consider for grading practices and grading considerations. And it's sort of in three, we've broken down our framework in three buckets. Number one is being very, very clear on why schools exist, and is where we currently are is the current conversation, the conversation that we are supposed to be or should be having, if that is the role of schools. Schools are critical places to the future and the current reality of the democratic definition and the American dream, sort of that promise for every student, whether we are language learners or native English speakers. At some point, all of our families were immigrant families, right? The second sort of frame or phase of the equity framework is understanding how did it happen that we're getting to some of the conversations, particularly I want us to be clear on how did we get to some of the conversations that we're having about the grading process, and how do we need to shift that conversation in order for us to truly be having conversations and making changes that change the objectivity and opportunity to a quality education and quality feedback for our dual language and multilingual learners. Finally, it's how do we ensure that we return education to its democratic purpose. I'm going to be honest with you, the majority of today's session really is going to challenge us, and it's going to push us to think about the very real discrepancies between what we know is good and right for dual language and multilingual learners and what is currently happening. And so I want us to really take this time not to say, oh man, look at all the things that are flawed, look at all the things that we can and or cannot change right now, but to say instead, listen, we may be late in the game to make certain shifts right now, but it doesn't stop us from being strategic planners, strategic change makers, and strategic agents of change, okay? We should all be like equity fighter, everything that we do. Nothing is more important than doing that. And when it comes to like this high stakes accountability, grading, school accountability sort of conversation that is now, it's make or break for us to make some decisions. So I wanna make sure that I share that equity framework and the role that it's played in this session in particular, especially in light of where we just were just a little bit ago, okay? So let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so what I would like for us to do really quickly before we move too far into our session again, take two, is think about what are your greatest wows and wonderings when it comes to grading dual language and multilingual students. A wow is defined as something that you see that's working successfully, an innovative idea or practice or ways of connecting, grading, and feedback to students. And a wondering is defined as a burning question that we hope to resolve today during our time together or in future partnerships or whatever continued conversations that we may have. Let's go ahead and take just a couple of minutes for everybody to chat into the chat box. What are your greatest wows and wonderings in your context?
There's actually no more chat box. I took that away.
I think that as part of our security checkpoint, the chat box function has gone away. However, give me just 1 second. We roll with the punches here because technology, you all know, is my Achilles heel. So I'm always prepared with the plan B. Okay. Here we go. My good friends, we're gonna ask that you text your responses. I told you we're always prepared with a plan B, C, D, E. Please text your responses to 312-683-6310. Again, I'm gonna share that one more time. The number is 312-683-6310. Text your responses, wows and wonderings. Y eso en verdad es algo, alguien que debe de estar escribiendo en la pantalla. 312. She has permission to be writing that down. 683-6310. Text your responses to wows and wonderings. I always want to make sure, particularly when it comes to high stakes conversations like this, that we take an opportunity to hear what's already working well with our partners around the globe. And what questions do we really need to focus on in order for us to best maximize our time, okay? For those of you that may be wondering, especially in light of our recent security breach, that is literally the line for the info@tajlearning.com. Our office manager mans that line, so it is a secure internal line. Okay. And we're gonna give it about 1 more minute of wait time. Wows and wonderings. Text some to the number that you see on the screen. Awesome. And I am jotting them down as we get them on my end. I thank everybody for rolling with Plan C, and about one more minute. Okay. I'm capturing just a couple more really quickly so that I can make sure to address some of these and share them with the group. I thank everybody again for Plan C, D, E, and F being just part of how we roll with the punches today. Okay. Yep. Okay. So my good friends, I thank you for allowing me to just take a little bit of time to read through some of your feedback, some of your wows and wondering. It's very, very insightful. A couple of things, I always want to start with the wows because there are a lot of amazing things that are happening already. For many of our dual language and multilingual students, they are showing such endurance, such grit, and such strength of heart to be able to continue persisting, practicing language, seeking out bilingual partnerships, reaching out to others if they're in the secondary level through different partnerships that have been created with elementary schools, with districts across the country and around the world that have partnered, as we have suggested since the very beginning with some of their public media stations, to do model lessons and give access to some of the tools that are really at people's fingertips, but we don't necessarily know that unless somebody sort of shares that and helps us understand how to use that in our homes, in a vehicle, and using a media source that really feels familiar to us. So I want to make sure to name that. Some of us are already saying that we have transitioned from a grade base, a percentage based grading system into a mastery based or a proficiency based grading system. And it's really helping to sort of provide that consistency of feedback around mastery in progress, not there yet, et cetera, et cetera. However, that 1, 2, 3, 4 proficiency scale has been sort of articulated at the district and the state level. I will tell you, for those schools that have already transitioned to a proficiency-based scale, they are having the least challenges of the schools that we've been working with in the districts and states and countries that we've been partnering with around the globe, okay? It is one of those things that are 10 times, that's not a real researchable number, excuse me for being a little bit exaggerative. It is much easier for districts to switch to a proficiency-based grade scale and account for students' language proficiency when they're already operating under scales than when they're trying to shift from a 90, 80, 70, 60 that may not even be driven by a rubric. I think this idea of formative assessment and the ability to check for understanding with those students that are already on the radar, that is one of those things that has been a wow, and it's giving us real-time data that is helping our students to be successful and provide grades that offer feedback to families that truly reflect the progress of kids with what they know most recently about their progress thus far, okay? Now the questions that still remain are, well, are we actually getting what we need, the information that we need from the assessments that we're giving right now? How do we know that the assessments that we're giving are going to prepare them for standards-based, high-stakes assessments if they do return, right? Because the conversation about getting rid of them for good, it's begun, but it hasn't been begun by the vast majority of educators and voices at the table for that conversation. What about report cards that don't necessarily lend themselves to expressing or understanding what proficiency looks like? What is going to be the impact here for students should they have a pass-fail system, if they should not do well, if they haven't engaged? And then finally, the kicker question that I always love it when I see this question come up. Monolingual students who are navigating one language, teachers want to know, how is it fair to them when we account for language proficiency as we report out student progress? So I want to tackle those a little bit one at a time. I think that the very few slides that I've prepared for everybody really do address all of these questions, but now you have sort of the direct number to the office manager and the info@tajulearning.com. So if you want a follow-up conversation or follow-up partnership, please, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out via text or call, okay? Let's go ahead to slide 5. And we're gonna do slide 5, 6, and 7 really quickly, but they're pertinent to this conversation about grading. So go ahead, co-facilitator. Okay, so first and foremost, the very first session that we had and the first of the 7, let's go back really quickly, Amanda. Perdóname. Número 5. Perfect. The very first one that we had, it was really around ensuring that we understood the rights of our multilingual learners, particularly our coded L students in dual language programs are especially susceptible right now. And what I want to make sure that everybody understands is that if we are currently not providing our students with access to all of the programs, services, activities that they require that include access to language and exposure to language, an opportunity to reinforce and practice language in a vehicle that is accessible to them, in a way that's accessible to them as school agents, right? And agencies as LEAs, SEAs, whatever the case may be, we cannot fail students for our systematic inability to provide those supports for students. That does not translate to an F for kiddos, a failure, an incomplete. That's an incomplete on our scorecard. As educators, I don't want it to feel like an attack because it's not, right? Systematically, we have not built and designed the supports, right, in schools necessary to account for some of these things for our most vulnerable learners. But I want us to automatically say if they didn't have what their protected group required, we cannot fault them for not thriving and succeeding. That's number one, okay? Let's move forward. Co-facilitator. Al 6. Mil gracias, lo agradezco. Okay. Now, we talked about, like in, I think it was session 2, what are some of the data points that we need to make sure that we have access, availability to, that we are reinforcing and monitoring for all of our multilingual learners and dual language learners? We talked about access to meaningful tools, resources, time to engage with learning experiences that had embedded scaffolds. Those scaffolds must be strategically matched to the proficiency levels of your students, okay? They also needed to have meaningful matched language, grade level experiences, and scaffolds to exposure and productive language. That is the school's responsibility in terms of ensuring that they had reasonable learning conditions, accessibility to learning, the conditions for engagement with those learning experiences, and the resources necessary to be full participants, okay? I want to move forward to number 7 because this was a critical one. And I think it's one of the reasons why there was so many people that were interested and followed up after the strategy session that we did. So if we can go to slide 7 really quickly, co-facilitator. In the sort of the strategy session that we did, we really talked about like, what are some of the ways to minimize the burden of having to create scaffolds for each individual child while being really strategic and partnering across departments to make sure that every child had scaffolds matched to their proficiency levels while they were at home so that they could engage in, right, not only receptive but also productive language if they're in dual language in both languages of instruction, okay? This was one of the things that we shared when we were engaged in this piece, this little forms of scaffolding across sensory, interactive, and graphic. And it's one of those things that I've heard back from a lot of people that it really did make a lot of sense, and it felt like a much more tangible thing that they could do without spending all night, all day, every single day planning scaffolds, making those scaffolds a little bit more generic, but ensuring that every single teacher, every single building, all program models had them for the program languages that they were implementing so that level 1 students had access to those level 1 supports, level 2 students had those access to those levels, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm glad that that was something that really resonated with everybody. But again, this is about access, engagement, and ability for your students to be a full participant in your dual language and multilingual programming. And without these scaffolds, without these supports, we have to really question what it is that we want to communicate with a grade. So let's move forward into number 8. Here's where it gets a little bit saucy. Dale para allá, co-facilitator. Okay. Y vamos a dejar esta porque esto es la última que hicimos. We're going to go to 9. I apologize. Thanks for rolling with the punches, everybody. We're trying to crunch in more stuff than usual in light of our recent situation. So, my good friends, I've had a number of very strange conversations around access and around the role of attendance. We have many districts, many LEAs and SEAs around the globe where we have a significant number of students who have, for their teachers at least, not for all individuals within the school system, but for their teachers have gone MIA, missing in action. They have not heard from them. They have not received work from them since the first however many sessions that they transitioned into a blended or digital sort of platform. We also have a lot of schools that at a given point, they went all or nothing. And by all or nothing, I do mean that they either chose, if not everybody, 100% of their student population or the majority of their student population is going to be successful in a digital platform, then nobody would. And so things sort of ended very abruptly. I want us to consider these key pieces. Number one, if grades are given, we cannot possibly utilize attendance as an indicator for their learning, their access, reasonability of learning conditions, their progress, their mastery, their struggles, et cetera, I want us to remove attendance from the picture, right? So if you have students that have gone MIA, that have not engaged with learning experiences through your blended learning option or your fully digital option, that is not an indication of success, mastery, progress, or anything like that. However, I want us to make sure that we are all clear in terms of what grades represent if we are going to have a strategic conversation, kind of a one-sided conversation, I'm sorry, everybody, around how do we address the wonderings that we all already have and brought us to this shared call together. So I would like for you to text to that number again. Again, that number is, and I've got to look at it again. Espérate, con el otro teléfono. Okay, it is 312 683 6310. 312 683 6310. What is the purpose of a grade? What should a grade represent? Okay, what is the purpose of a grade, or what should a grade represent? Text your responses to 312 683 6310. I think the most insightful response, you might get a free copy of my book. We might just have to send it to you to increase the collaboration on this very interesting Wednesday webinar. Best and most insightful response to one of those two questions, text to 312 683 6310, gets a free copy of Alexandra's book, Coaching Teachers in Dual Language and Bilingual Classrooms, a responsive coaching and feedback cycle, or feedback and coaching cycle. Let's give you 2 minutes on the clock. We're going to make them real American minutes as well. Okay. I am loving the responses. As you can see by the smile on my face, I know it's just building the anticipation to know what the best, sort of most insightful response is, my friends. I appreciate all your thoughtful feedback and ideas. Some of the things that we're hearing already, there seems to be a really strong theme of it being really a communication to parents on one hand and to students about students' proficiencies according to the standards, being great formative assessment data for teachers to plan from in terms of who is learning and who is not learning. It should be of their development and progress towards mastery. Else. It is allow students, parents, guardians. I love it. Where is the child at? What they're working towards, and it should guide the child on where they should progress to next. I am loving that response. That's awesome. So the theme of the responses, drum roll please, is that grading really should be a reflection of where kids are right now and where they're going in terms of their proficiency and understanding of a range of standards. For those of us that serve dual language and multilingual learners, please know that that communication must, absolutely must be a communication of progress, of where they are and where they have to go across both content and language. And if Alexandra were the decision maker around cultural objectives for Pillar 3 for our dual language programs as well. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give a snap to that myself. That requires that we be very, very clear and that we allow ourselves to really get laser focused on what the priority area standards are for every grade level for the time that we have. Typically what's fourth quarter is not going to be what students are going to learn during fourth quarter this year. But we have to be laser focused on what it is that we want students to learn and which assessments are actually going to provide them an opportunity to do so, and how we are going to get an indication of progress from students across all of those pieces. It requires that grading comes from a place from teachers of access for students, of transparency of what it is that we're looking for in terms of the grade, not just you got an A because you showed up or didn't show up and got an F, or that we told kids that we were going to do packets that were optional, but then they became mandatory at some point in the game, that students have access to the language supports that they need with clear understanding of the goals that they're heading to, and that we also provide them with opportunities for literacy, content, and proficiency growth through access and exposure. Okay, thank you, co-facilitator. You already knew that we were heading to the next slide. Oops. Yo no quiero compartir la mía. There we go. Here we go. Let's go to slide number 10. All right. And remember, this is a little bit difficult for some of you to see because of the reality of us just doing a screen share. If you change the setting on your side, you can turn your screen share itself, the slide, into a full screen mode. That makes it easier to see sometimes. But also remember that you'll have access to this PDF on the YouTube channel, the link to it, as well as on our website. We always post it right after the sessions. So I don't want you to worry too much about that piece. There's a couple of pieces that I want to make sure to share with you. Number one is that teachers need to be clear on why they're giving a grade, okay? What is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of communicating progress right now during fourth quarter? Is it to make sure that these core priority standards, right, are supported, are reinforced so that students don't have to worry about additional summer learning loss when they get back? Is it so that they continue and maintain their current proficiency, or to continue working on their goals for language proficiency while they're at home, as well as their literacy level through authentic practices and learning experiences? What is it that we actually want to communicate? And how do we get very, very clear on the grading policies that are going to allow us to communicate that in a grade rather than A, B, C, D, F? That is the most fair way of ensuring that a grade is meaningful. When we have teachers that ask, yeah, but it's not fair to the monolingual students. I don't know that monolingual students are saying that it's not fair that they don't have access to grade level instruction at a proficiency level that they can understand, or that they don't yet produce language at a proficiency level that it's reflective of theirs, right? So I don't mean to be flip, but I think this conversation about fairness is a little bit, it's easy to get lured into because we're doing something different. But when we do something different that doesn't meet the needs and doesn't benefit our most struggling students in the system, we don't have the same pushback around how equitous those systems and those practices are. The reality is, if our students are proficient, right, in terms of their productive language at a level 2, if you're in access state, that should be very familiar in terms of what students are able to do and able to produce in terms of language, then we must be responsible and always have our equity compass, which to me is also the moral compass of this work, that says we are going to take that into account and look for proficiency of this content within the bounds of the language that they're able to access and produce, okay? The second piece that we need to make sure that we do when it comes to grading practices is that we really think about those unfriendly systems that we might need to override, okay? For some of us in our grade books, it automatically defaults a missing assignment into a 0, or it automatically defaults certain things into 0s, Fs, all sorts of practices that right now are neither practical, fair, or in line with ensuring the rights being upheld of all of your dual language and multilingual learners. So I want to make sure that you all know that part of the advocacy that has to take place after you leave this call, some of the work really needs to start for those of you that are in district and state level positions, is that you're going to need to make sure that you understand how to override those systems that are creating false failures for your students for outside of their control, okay? As we're going through these sort of 6 key pieces that you can do to make sure that you are utilizing the equity framework compass on your grading practices, please know that you can always text those questions to that same number, and we will make sure that we follow up with you accordingly. The other piece is that you have to make sure that you have a check and balance system built in inherently into every grading that your teachers are going to do. So by that I mean, teachers naturally enter their grades, it goes in for approval, but they're not the ones that necessarily finalize, print them out, send them to parents. Typically it goes through a series of hands, whether it's a tech coordinator, assistant principal, a counselor, whatever, accountability person, whatever the case may be. Your dual language specialists, your multilingual specialists, you are key gatekeepers during this time. For me, one of the critical pieces that needs to happen is that you need to have joint time and voice to be part of the checks and balances in between it leaving the hands of the teachers and it entering and leaving the hands of the school and entering the hands of your families, okay? Your goal is to make sure that you check to see, has language proficiency been expressed, right? Were these teachers that provided students with the scaffolds and supports that needed on the front end? Did we protect their rights so that we can honestly communicate the most up-to-date and real-time message and communication around where your students are and where they have still to go, okay? I wanna pause there to really let that marinate. This is the time, I'm gonna be honest with you, that I usually hate to be the one at the table because I'm always the one like, excuse me, I hate to be la latina otra vez en la mesa que tiene que hacerle esta pregunta, pero a la misma vez, how are we giving this child an F when they didn't have access to their federally protected civil rights? I say it with a smile. We need to say it that way. We don't need to take this opportunity to create enemies. We need allies more than ever, but I don't want us to shy away from the inevitable conversation that creating checks and balances creates for us, okay? The second piece is that I want to make sure that you have insight into from those liaisons, partners, personnel that sometimes have more information directly from parents during that checks and balance from our families than our teachers do. Frankly, there are some families that are very suspicious of this digital world. I will tell you, and I've told you time and time again, I am one of those people. I am fiercely suspicious for reasons that were proven here today. Because of that, I can understand those families that frankly say, I don't want my kid going on Google Classrooms and on Zoom and accessing this app and that app and all sorts of things because they just don't feel comfortable and confident with how that information is going to get used. I think we have to value that and understand where that comes from. And we have to get insight into who's still engaged in learning, who simply had an access issue, who, right, where your families are, and how we're going to ensure continuity of opportunity learning of our students if solutions did not create opportunity for your students in the meantime, in between time, okay? I wanna pause there again to allow everybody to sort of take that in. For some of our school districts, you have parent liaisons who have been in communication with families, but their insight and their data, their information hasn't gotten to those people that are in charge of sort of report cards, accountability, assessment, et cetera, et cetera. For some of you, it's office clerks that you have engaged or parapros, paraprofessionals, classroom assistants, aides that you have tapped into because they really were the heart and soul of the community, and nothing happened in the community without them knowing, and you have brilliantly tapped into their relationships to make sure that you know who's where and that everybody is okay and that they have what they need and that we have a plan in place to provide continuity of opportunity, okay? I want you to make sure that you are tapping into all of those liaisons and partners who know more about your families than sometimes we do, because that's just the nature of the relationship that we have established with them so far. Doesn't mean that it has to always be the case. It just means it's a reflection of what we have right now. Number 5 on the list in the green or the teal-ish is that we have to take this opportunity to identify where the gaps are right now. What are the challenges that we're facing right now that are solvable in a long-term plan? Right now, the gap that is being exposed by the number of districts that continue to be on a 90, 80, 70, 60, all right, if you don't turn it in, it converts into a 0. These are exposing opportunities for us to be strategic and planners. It is not a failure, okay? It is really great insight and formative assessment for us as advocates of dual language and multilingual learners, for us to begin putting the pieces into place for more strategic shifts and alignment of opportunities to our dual language and multilingual learners in the years to come. I want us to look for these opportunities in this formative assessment to come in the form of accountability structure, grading assurances, utilize. They should be side-by-side rubrics. If you have multilingual programs and you're not using side-by-side rubrics, I'm gonna go ahead and say tisk, tisk, tisk. But it's not negative, it's just an opportunity for growth. Okay, the length of the school calendar and the support systems that we put into place right now, I want us to deeply consider, what is the length of this have to be? What is the length of summer supports going to have to be? How are we going to need to start arming our teachers who serve dual language and multilingual learners right now to make strategic shifts that address the gaps in their knowledge and ability to meet your students' needs right now through the stumblings that we are engaging upon right now, okay? And finally, I want you to be prepared and know the consequences of failing to strategically plan and some of the policies that I'm hearing around the country, okay? The most flexible and friendly grading system is a proficiency scaled system, okay? Because we can account for both language and content growth without having some of the consequences that I'm hearing from around the world, from some of the greatest thought partners that I have the benefit of also having my own thought partners in this work to a pass-fail, or we say that if you don't maintain your current grade, you're gonna get an incomplete or things like that. There are huge consequences for our students, particularly the higher up they go in their K-12 journeys around their class rank, which impacts scholarships, grants, college and university acceptances. There's issues with promotion policies, newcomer status within the system itself, pass-fail consequences. Motivate and engagement of students is one of the greatest consequences that I have, as you know, been very vocal about, even with my own children. When we say that you're just going to get a pass for doing something, or that you're going to get a fail if you don't do it in the same way that it would have looked like without any flexibility in of what we would do in the classroom, I think that it really has huge consequences in terms of how willing our students are continuing to choose to stay engaged from home with their schools and with their educators who are there to serve them. We are moving forward to número 11. Mira, estamos haciendo bien. Yo no sé cómo lo hicimos. So the last share out that I want to do, my friends, I want us to think about, when you ask yourself, what is the last report of student progress that was knowable, right? What was the last thing that you can report out, even if it didn't look the way it should look like on a test, of critical learning across content and language? What can you report? What is their current condition tell you? What was the last piece of information, the most real-time piece of information do you have on your students? I want you to share that to the text assets, all the positive things that they showed you that they were able to do. We are texting it again to. Ay, Dios mío, yo no sé cómo yo no sé este número, pero ¿qué vamos a hacer? Thank you. My co-facilitator is 10 times faster than I am, right? When we think about our multilingual and dual language learners, and the last piece of information that we know us in terms of their progress and proficiency, what did it tell us? What do we know? Share your insights. 2312-683-6310. The best share out from this one as well. It has to be somebody different from the last. You will also get a free copy of my book, Coaching Teachers in Dual Language and Bilingual Classrooms, a responsive cycle to observation and feedback. I want you to think about their proficiency across content and language. Okay, across content and language. What can you report out that you know with certainty? 683-6310. And I want to share some insight. Last responses to the last question that I didn't have a chance to communicate because we had moved forward. The purpose of a grade is a representation of students' understanding of content in regards to the teacher's style. It should help generate teacher feedback, but sadly, we have transitioned to leveraging it as a for or against kids and a tool for motivating them. It's going to be on your grade. We're going to grade you for it, and that should be your external carrot, and that's not the purpose of a grade. So we need to remove that from the conversation, the narrative about grades, especially now more than ever, my friends. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I want to make sure that I have sufficient wait time for those of you that are sharing your insights into what's the last piece of information that you can report out. What do you know about your students' progress in real time, the most real-time information you have? Awesome. So I have a brilliant one. I want to share this one, not because it's the only text response that has been shared, but for those of our students who continue to be engaged, even if it's that they're taking pictures of things that they're doing around their house or leaving voicemails, audio messages, text messages, WhatsApp, whatever the case may be, they might not be doing the assessment on an app in Google Classrooms or a number of different spaces. But if we know what students know and are able to do in linguistically appropriate ways, I feel like whoever just shared that one, that was a mic drop, because it is as simple as that. Who is making progress around those key, absolutely essential priority standards for Q4 in linguistically appropriate ways and in culturally appropriate ways? And you all, my friends, are the gatekeepers to ensure that we're not communicating something to parents that doesn't reflect exactly that. I want to make sure that again, I want you to think very clearly. As a result of this time that we've shared together, I want you to think to yourself, what are you going to continue to do? What are you going to share with others, those that might be in decision-making, key decision-making roles at the district level or at the building level, that are going to be key advocates, key allies in this work together? And what are you going to work to change as a result of this webinar? We'd love to hear your successes, whether it's on social media or beyond. For those of you who have been following us, if we can move forward, co-facilitator. I want to make sure that this idea of grading is especially important to me, because I worry right now, actually, as of I want to say about 2018, 2017, this was the fact. Language learners currently represent the highest dropout rate of all subgroups, of any subgroups that are served by our schools in the US, at least for right now. And 7,000 students drop out of high school every single day. That does not account for the number of students that drop out of middle school. Our grading practices and our communication of progress for students has to be something that helps to change that narrative. For those of you that want to know how to get additional support, especially since we are about to have our last two Wednesday webinars, here are the PD opportunities that we have already transitioned into our blended PD options. Go ahead to 13, my co-facilitator. We have the dual language leadership overview, the curriculum mapping and dual language. We have coaching teachers in bilingual and dual language classrooms. We can do the coaching as well as the full institutes. We have ELA, ELD, and our flagship, which is Equity is Not a Bumper Sticker, critical approach to dismantling issues of equity in education for our dual language and multilingual learners. And we also have technical support and one-on-one coaching. I want to make sure that everybody knows you can get a hold of any one of our team members. I'm terrible with email, but if you email info@tajulearning.com, let's go ahead to the last slide. They will make sure to get a hold of you, answer any of the questions that you have. Please make sure that you go online to get copies of today's PowerPoint, and you'll have access to all of the other PDFs of the PowerPoints from the previous or the prior 4 PDs that we've done. We have a ton of resources that are available for free on there, and it gives you all the information if you want to follow up with additional coaching and or PD through digital options or blended options for your district. We did it, my friends. We hung in there despite our first Zoom bombing experience. It was definitely an experience to me, but thank you for smiling with me, singing with me, hanging with me, despite the ugly words that people felt the need to share. So I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. I hope that I see you next Wednesday. It might be on a different venue because I don't know how many times I'm going to be able to weather that with a full smile on my face. But that being said, we appreciate your partnership, your service to all of your kiddos. Be change agents, and we can't wait to hear about all your successes. Take care, everybody.